Now in our 26th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1370 with a release and air date of Saturday, May 31st, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the internet since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1370 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The FCC has voted to make more than 20,000 MHz of spectrum available, specifically to accommodate satellite operations. We will have the details. It's almost June, and that means Field Day 2025 is coming up soon. The league announces upcoming changes to leadership positions in the Pacific Division. Having an amateur radio geosynchronous satellite is the target of a new ham radio project. The ARRL's influence over the International Amateur Radio Union could be reduced with the proposed IARU restructuring. The ARRL Teachers Institute is set to have a record year in 2025. Amateur spectrum is addressed in a new U.S. House reconciliation bill. We will have the details. The FCC bans what it calls bad labs when it comes to import type certification. The ARRL Foundation is accepting new grant applications. There is a rather unique special event station coming up, and it will be on 42.8 MHz. We will tell you about it. And we will have the details on what scientists and astronomers call the dynamic duo of the universe. That's all straight ahead in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will attempt to answer the question, what do you think you're doing? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us all aboard the Wayback Machine to the early 1920s, where we find out that vacuum tubes were now making CW practical. And that they were also making voice transmissions possible. Experimental broadcasts using radio telephone, or just phone to hams, began as experimental radio broadcasts by amateurs and some of the wireless telegraph companies, including Marconi and De Forest. This week's episode is simply called Radio Telephone. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters facility where we can chalk up another wet weekend, this is W2XBS.
And reporting this week from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Jansson, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where it is about time for the thunderstorms to finally stop, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
Reporting from chilly Naugatuck, Connecticut, where for the past week it feels more like early March than it does the unofficial start of summer, I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our New York News Bureau, where the Cottonwood are doing their seasonal shedding routine, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our top secret news bureau, high above the bluffs of Wisconsin, where the squirrels carry HTs and the deer know CW better than most extras, I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the grass in our hayfield is already 2 feet tall, and the farmers are starting to get the first cutting baled up. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
Leading off our news this week, the Federal Communications Commission is aggressively pursuing spectrum abundance as part of its Final Frontiers agenda to secure U.S. leadership in space and supercharge the possibilities of satellite broadband. Today, the Commission voted to kickstart a proceeding that could unlock more than 20,000 megahertz of spectrum for high-speed internet delivered from space. That amount is more than the sum total of all spectrum available for satellite broadband today. Specifically, in a notice of proposed rulemaking, the Commission will seek comment on expanding satellite connectivity across 4 spectrum bands: 12.7 through 13.25 gigahertz, 42 to 42.5 gigahertz, 51.4 to 52.4 gigahertz, the so-called W band at 92 through 94 gigahertz, 94.1 through 100 gigahertz, 102 through 109.5 gigahertz, and 111.8 through 114.25 gigahertz. These underused bands, located in spectrum neighborhoods ideal for satellite broadband, are prime candidates for modernization. For many years, outdated regulations restricted satellite operations in the 12.7 gigahertz band. The 42 gigahertz band is one of the rare bands that still remains greenfield. The 52 gigahertz band has no licensed commercial users, and the W band presents exciting opportunities for gigabit capacity over a massive but mostly empty swath of spectrum long considered outside the practical realm of physics. The Commission intends to make good on its year-long efforts to unleash these bands for next-generation services. The 12.7 and 42 gigahertz bands, which the Commission previously considered for terrestrial use, are adjacent to workhorse satellite frequencies in the Ku and V bands. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr said in a statement after the vote that each band is a potential game changer. The agency said that the amount of spectrum under consideration is greater than all the spectrum presently available for satellite broadband. He said additional frequencies were ripe territory for so-called next-generation services. It was unclear what impact, if any, the notice of proposed rulemaking would have on the amateur radio service. The move was applauded by the Satellite Industry Association in a statement on its website. Meanwhile, there has been growing and intense support to open up the 52 gigahertz band domestically after international decisions at WARC 19, and by seeking comment on the W band, the Commission continues recent initiatives to push the limits of the high-band spectrum and provide a first-mover advantage for U.S. licensed operators.
The days are longer. The weather is warmer. The calendar will say June on Sunday. That means we are in the countdown to 2025 ARRL Field Day. With all the details on what you need to prepare for Field Day this year, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this special report from League headquarters.
There's a lot of excitement building around the theme of Radio Connects, and hams across North America are preparing for the big weekend of June 28th and 29th. In their efforts to prepare for the activations, many radio amateurs are researching the finer points of Field Day rules. All of the information is available on the ARRL Field Day website, but ARRL Contest Program Manager Paul Bork, N1SFE, wants to make sure hams can find answers to the most frequently asked questions, like, I'm interested in participating in Field Day for the first time this year. How can I find a club near me that's hosting the Field Day so I can join in on the fun? And which digital modes are allowed during Field Day? There are more questions and more answers and a wealth of additional information available at the ARRL Field Day website, www.arrl.org/field-day. Click on the Rules and Resources link where you'll find rules, information packets, and more answers to frequently asked questions. There's also an FAQ published in the 2025 ARRL Field Day Guide, starting on page 57 of the June issue of QST. Bork says that if there's a specific question that's not covered in the Field Day Guide in QST or on the website, contact fdinfo@arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Another frequently asked question about field day is, I plan on operating portable during field day as a single operator. Am I allowed to operate from multiple locations throughout the event? Class B portable stations are fixed stations. And the answer provided is that all operations should be located within a circle whose diameter does not exceed 300 meters or 1,000 feet. The only field day operating class that's allowed to operate from more than one location is Class C, mobile. A mobile station must have all equipment in or on the vehicle and must be capable of being operated while in motion. For example, you can't mount a telescoping mast to your trailer hitch and erect a full-sized beam or vertical antenna. Also, don't forget the ARRL Field Day merch. T-shirts, complete with sections checklist on the back, pins, patches, stickers, posters, and more may be ordered from the ARRL store. Place your order soon to ensure your swag gets to you in time for the big event.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The ARRL reports that early Thursday morning, May 22, 2025, the United States House of Representatives passed a massive reconciliation bill that contains spectrum provisions relevant to amateur radio. Here with all the details on this late-breaking story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ at League Headquarters.
Within 2 years, not less than 600 megahertz must be identified from between 1.3 and 10 gigahertz for reallocation to commercial use for broadband services. The identified spectrum must be auctioned by the FCC for such services on an exclusive licensed basis as follows: not less than 200 megahertz within 3 years, that's mid-2028, and the remaining spectrum at least 400 megahertz within 6 years, that's mid-2031. Excluded from the spectrum that could be reallocated for these purposes is 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz, which includes the temporary secondary amateur band at 3.300 to 3.45 gigahertz and 5.925 to 7.125 gigahertz. With regard to amateur spectrum, the bands that potentially could be subject to consideration for reallocation under this legislation are 13 centimeters, 2300 to 2310, and 2390 to 2450 megahertz, and 5 centimeters, 5650 to 5925 megahertz. At this time, a number of bands have been mentioned informally for consideration, none of which include amateur spectrum, but the bands under consideration could change, and ARRL will closely monitor the evolving situation. Additionally, some government operations may be required to consolidate in current amateur secondary spectrum that is already shared with those government users. In select instances, this might constrain amateur operations if such a consolidation occurs. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
It is to be emphasized that these provisions have been passed by the House, but key United States senators have not agreed to some aspects and have stated their intention to modify these provisions as the bill moves through Senate consideration. The stated goal for final enactment is by July 4, 2025.
The ARRL today announced leadership changes in the Pacific Division. ARRL Director Anthony Marson, W7XM, who has served the Pacific Division as director since January 2024, has stepped down effective May 25, 2025. Marson was first appointed to the ARRL board as vice director in November 2021. Vice Director John Litz, NZ6Q, accedes to the director's chair to complete the remainder of a 3-year term ending December 31, 2025. Litz was appointed vice director in April 2024. Before that, he was ARRL San Joaquin Valley section manager from January 2020. Litz, from Stockton, California, was first licensed in 1974, and he is an ARRL Diamond Club donor and life member. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, will announce a successor to Litz to fill the vacant vice director's seat. The ARRL Pacific Division is comprised of the ARRL sections of East Bay, Sacramento Bay, San Francisco, San Joaquin Valley, Santa Clara Valley, Nevada, and Pacific.
It is the beginning of a new month and it's time for the Volunteer Monitoring Report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. Here is this month's activity report of the Volunteer Monitor Program. A commendation was issued to an operator in Texas for exceptional courtesy and guidance to new operators regarding procedures on the High Fivers Friendship net on 3.908 MHz. A commendation was issued to an operator in Florida for exceptional efforts to maintain the Florida SARnet linked repeater system on 446.00 MHz, and for instructing newcomers in net procedures. Technician class operators in Texas, Colorado, and Florida were reminded of the limitations of their licenses regarding FT8 operation on 20 meters. Under FCC rules, technicians are not allowed 20-meter operation. An advisory was issued to a technician class operator in Alabama concerning FT8 operation on 15 meters. Technician class operators in Florida, Texas, and California received advisories regarding FT8 operation on 40 meters. Technicians have no FT8 authority on either 15 or 40 meters. An operator in New Jersey was issued an advisory concerning proper identification on 75 meters. Section 97.119 Subpart A requires amateur stations to transmit the assigned call sign at the end of each communication, and at least every 10 minutes during a communication. A virtual volunteer monitor program was presented to the Gateway Amateur Radio Club in Georgia. The totals for this report's monitoring were 1,883 hours on HF frequencies, and 2,260 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 4,143 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
AMSAT DL has sent a request for expression of interest to various other AMSAT organizations and amateur radio associations for a proposed ham radio-focused project known as Future Geo, operating from geosynchronous satellite. The group is hoping to receive proposals no later than June 30th. AMSAT DL's request comes 2 years after the European Space Agency described its vision of having amateur radio on a geosynchronous satellite designed to cover the north of North America and Europe, and which drew on proposals from AMSAT DL and AMSAT UK. Meanwhile, a new satellite-based FM repeater comes online in June. On board the Hades ICM satellite, it will initially activate on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. It has an uplink of 145.875 MHz and a downlink of 436.666 MHz. Another repeater on Hades R operates full-time with a 145.925 MHz uplink and a 436.888 MHz downlink.
According to minutes released from a recent ARRL Executive Committee meeting, ARRL has suggested its influence with the International Amateur Radio Union could become limited should the proposed IARU restructuring plan be adopted. Within the current structure, ARRL serves as the International Secretariat of the IARU Administrative Council. This gives ARRL the ability to nominate both the President and Vice President of the IARU Administrative Council. Member societies from each country then vote on the nominations. The current IARU restructuring plan suggests a flatter structure that gives direct power to the member societies in the form of a General Assembly. The member societies would elect officers and board members directly without nominations put forth by ARRL. In short, ARRL would transition from nominating officers to simply being one vote out of roughly 160 member societies that would make up the AIRU. In its meeting minutes, ARRL noted the League is the primary financial backer of IARU and had calls scheduled to further discuss the matter.
The Federal Communications Commission this week adopted new rules to block and remove Chinese government and other untrustworthy actors' ability to assert control over America's wireless equipment authorization process. The rules will ensure that the hundreds of equipment test labs and telecommunications certification bodies entities that test, review, and certify wireless electronic devices for importation, marketing, and sale in the U.S. do not have ownership interests that present national security risks, including the risk that they would do the bidding of a foreign adversary. The FCC requires all electronic devices that emit radio frequencies, including IoT devices, computers, fitness trackers, network gear, smartphones, and baby monitors, to be authorized for use in the U.S. RadTel, iRadio, Quancheng, Retevis, and TID Radio, among others, will be subject to this new regulation. Each year, private entities, known as test labs, and telecommunication certification bodies, test tens of thousands of these devices and certify that they comply with various FCC rules, respectively. Accreditation bodies assess the test labs for competency and impartiality. Telecommunication certification bodies, accreditation bodies, and some test labs must be recognized by the FCC to perform these functions in the agency's process. However, prior to these new rules, the agency's eligibility criteria has been based primarily on technical competence, not trustworthiness. While the agency has in recent years barred entities on the FCC's covered list from having their devices approved for use in the U.S. due to determinations that such devices pose national security risks, these new rules ensure that the accreditation and certification bodies and test labs are themselves not untrustworthy actors. The FCC has reviewed currently recognized labs and found that a number of labs potentially have deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party. These include entities that are connected to Chinese state-owned enterprises, involved in China's military-civil fusion apparatus through their apparent work with the CCP's People's Liberation Army, and even entities that are themselves Chinese state actors. These labs have tested thousands of devices bound for the U.S. market over the last several years. In addition to the covered list, the new rules rely on official security determinations that the U.S. government has made, including the Defense Department's list of Chinese military companies and Department of Commerce entity list. This is action by the Commission on May 22, 2025 by report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking in FCC docket number 25-27.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, or TI, has 13 sessions announced in 2025, with more in the works. To tell us more about the Teachers Institute, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, Kilo Delta 8, India Delta Juliet, files this report.
The program is a donor-funded professional development program designed to help classroom teachers elevate their science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM programs using wireless technology. This is all possible because of the high level of confidence that our donors have in the program. We are grateful that many have stepped up to make all of this possible, said ARRL Director of Development Kevin Beal, K8EAL. Through donations to the ARRL Education and Technology Program, donors have entrusted ARRL to help teachers integrate amateur radio into their curriculum. And that support has been from all levels. During a YouTube telethon to benefit the program, individual hams contributed more than $21,000, which then unlocked another $20,000 challenge gift from donors. David Ginsburg, N3BKV, funded an endowment in the name of his parents. The High and Mimi Ginsburg educator position is the first of several major gifts to the program. We are so excited that we get to grow the program this year, said ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA. Part of that growth has involved making sessions available in local communities across the country. And the momentum continues to build around the program. We're seeing a huge response to the education world. Word is spreading, and teachers are excited for what the TI can help them accomplish, said Goodgame. Beal says those wishing to contribute to this entirely donor-funded program can visit www.arrl.org/give-to-STEM. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
Part of that growth has involved making sessions available in local communities across the country. After a successful first remote session was held on Staten Island, another will take place next week in Louisiana. The Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab is hosting one later in the year. The success of the program is evident, but the lasting impact may go even further than we can measure today, said Goodgame. Network media outlets have covered programs built by TI graduates, and there are hundreds of active hams in the schools that TI graduates lead. The momentum continues to build around the program. We're seeing a huge response from the education world. Word is spreading, and teachers are excited for what the TI can help them accomplish, said Goodgame.
In June, the ARRL Foundation is now accepting grant applications from amateur radio organizations for eligible amateur radio-related projects and initiatives, particularly those focused on educating, licensing, and supporting amateur radio activities. To grow amateur radio's future, youth-based projects and initiatives are especially encouraged. The ARRL Foundation grants programs, accepts proposals on a silical model 3 times a year, in February, June, and October. Proposals for the June grant period are accepted through October 31st. Awardees will be notified approximately 1 month after the closing of each cycle. The ARRL Foundation carefully manages a portfolio of endowments where donors have provided specific goals for their gifts, and that portfolio is invested and managed in a way that it can continue to support those goals for many years to come. Additional information and a link to the grant application can be found at www.awrl.org/amateur-radio-grants.
42.8 megahertz WA2XMN will broadcast from the Alpine Tower for the first time in over a decade. The commemorative Armstrong broadcast station will return next month to 42.8 megahertz in the New York City tri-state area. On Thursday, June 19th, Steve Hempel and the staff at the historic Alpine Tower in Alpine, New Jersey, will celebrate with a commemorative broadcast the 20th anniversary of the Armstrong Memorial event, which Hempel originally organized in 2005 to honor the man who made FM radio possible, Edwin Armstrong. WA2XMN, the Armstrong Memorial broadcast station, will return to the air on June 19th beginning at 12 p.m. Eastern, broadcasting on 42.8 megahertz, Armstrong's original low-band frequency. During previous transmissions, its signal has been heard from as far as 100 miles away. Most police scanners can monitor the VHF low band, as do software-defined radios. The tower is 425 feet high and is situated 500 feet above the Hudson River, giving it a commanding view of the greater New York City area. In fact, a number of New York TV stations were temporarily relocated here in the aftermath of the 9/11 disaster. The tower and original brick transmitter building were finished in 1937 to aid in Armstrong's FM experiments. The call sign is still etched in cement above the front door of Major Armstrong's original station building on the site today. The Alpine Tower staff has worked to preserve the history of the site nestled in the Palisades of Bergen County, about 15 miles northwest of the Empire State Building. Farley Dickinson University's Class B1 89.1 WFDU FM transmits from Alpine. With hand-built vintage parts, Hempel said his restored Phasotron transmitter, running 250 watts of power output, will feed into a Ringo vertical antenna mounted on the Alpine Tower at approximately 400 feet above ground level. Transmissions of the experimental station are in wideband frequency modulation, using the same technical standards as modern FM broadcast stations. Although the Phasotron was not even invented yet when Armstrong began his broadcast, the technology is approximately correct for the era, Dave Hersenberg wrote in his 2004 profile of Hempel's reenactment. Hempel said he will be broadcasting programming from the 2005 event, which includes their original Armstrong panel discussion and interviews with Major Armstrong's niece, Jeannie Hammond, and Tom Lewis, author of Empire of the Air. He will be airing David Ossman's production of Empire of the Air, The Men Who Made Radio, based on Lewis's book. Hempel added that he is planning a collaboration with Kirk Hartneck's This Week in Radio Tech podcast as part of the 42.8 megahertz coverage. He said that plans to stream online coverage of the 42.8 MHz broadcast are still being discussed. The last time WA2XMN broadcast was in 2015, Hempel said. A 2018 broadcast to honor Hammond, who had recently passed away, was canceled due to problems with the station antenna's transmission line. The Radio Club of America honored Hempel with a Special Appreciation Award in 2005 for the 70th anniversary broadcast. A consulting engineer since 1969, he is the founder of Solid Electronic Labs, which manufactures and sells FM broadcast exciters and stereo generators. FM radio has had an enormous impact on my career, and there's only one man who is truly responsible for giving me the opportunity to use that technology, Hempel said of his efforts to preserve the memory of Major Armstrong. The Armstrong or Alpine Tower is the site of the world's first FM broadcast station, W2XMN, broadcasting primarily on 42.8 MHz. It first signed on in 1938 and broadcast until July 1949, when the FCC shifted frequency allocations to the 88 to 108 MHz band we know today. Hempel also noted Major Armstrong's high-band FM broadcast station. It signed on in 1945 with the call sign W2XEA on 92.1 MHz. It moved to 93.1 in 1948 with the KE2XCC call sign. That station broadcast until March 1954, when it signed off a month after Armstrong died. It was 90 years ago when the pioneer who made FM radio possible put forth the first public demonstration of the technology. According to Columbia University, where Armstrong graduated with an electrical engineering degree, he described FM radio and then tuned on his receiver in front of the audience during a November 1935 Institute of Radio Engineers conference. An FM transmission from a friend's house in Yonkers came in free of static, with a fidelity never heard before.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If you're watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes. You won't have to remember calls, dates, URLs, or other details, just check the show notes. Well, let's start with an update from the 3Y Bouvet Island team. Ken, LA7GIA, reports that all 3 Yankee 0 Kilo antennas are being generously provided by K1LZ Cressy. The team has opted to use monobander antennas for 20, 15, and 10 meter bands. Specifically, they will have 3 elements on 20, 4 elements on 15, and 5 elements on 10. These antennas were manufactured in Bulgaria and custom made for Bouvet, featuring low weight yet high strength. The high-gain monobanders and ACOM amplifiers are anticipated to deliver a robust signal for the 3Y 0 Kilo de-expedition worldwide. With plans for the 2 radio tents and 8 stations, the establishment of the camp is progressing well. The team is dedicating considerable time and effort to ensure the success of this de-expedition. Contributions to support this endeavor can be made via PayPal to donate@3yankee0kilo.com. Each week, I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next week might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the House DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com and I'll take care of it. Kilo Hotel 8/K0NR and Kilo Hotel 8/K0JJW are both QRV from America Samoa until June 9th. The primary objective is summits on the air. They are using 20 through 10 meters sideband FT8 and FT4 with 10 watts to a wire antenna. QSL through LOTW only. They are also open to SCADs on 6 and 2 meters, any mode, and you can email kh8@k0nr.com to set that up. I've been DXing for over 50 years, and it just still amazes me when somebody says they're operating from America Samoa, running 10 watts to a wire antenna, and everywhere in the world they get ready to work them. That's the impact that the digital modes have had. Gianni IK1TTD is QRV on another, quote, holiday-style de-expedition, and Madagascar is 5R8TD until June 11th. He will be QRV from 2 locations. He is on 40 through 10 meters, mostly on 20, using an IC 706 Mark IIG with a vertical and an end-fed half-wave antenna. Didier F6BCW is QRV from Tukuhu Island, French Polynesia, as Tango X-Ray 5 United until June 8th. His primary focus is on contacts with Europe while also working other continents. He will be on 40 through 6 meters using CW and sideband modes only. QSL information includes F6EXV via OQRS on Club Log and LOTW after 6 months. Diego IZ0EWJ informs us that he plans to be QRV from Market Reef as Oscar Juliet 0 Lima until June 7th. He has an IC Mark II, an IC 706 Mark II, an IC 7300, an FT8057D, and an FT891. He will be running 300 watts into a multiband Windham antenna, a multiband HF vertical, and a 6-meter Yagi. He will be on sideband and digital modes on HF and 6 meters. QSOs will be uploaded to Club Log and LOTW, and you can QSL via I8K8C. My friend and clubmate Jay K4ZLE will be on a commercial cruise with ports in Iceland, Svalbard, and Norway until June 7th, and he is on his way already. His wife has rented the J Whiskey 5 Echo club station for him while in Svalbard. The ship will be import in Longyearbyen from 0600 UTC the 31st of May until 2300 UTC. He will not be operating the entire time in port, having a photo tour from 1300 to 1800 UTC. He is also taking his KX3 and will try to squeeze in a few cues from the other stops. Operations will be CW and FT8. A de-expedition to the Faroe Islands will occur from June 1st to June 10th, 2025, using the call signs Oscar Yankee 6 Fox Radio Alpha, Oscar Yankee 6 Alpha, Oscar Yankee stroke W9MK, and Oscar Yankee stroke K4LT. The team will operate on 160 through 6 meters with FT8, FT4 on sideband and CW as well. On 6 meters, they will use a 6-element Yankee. They will join the ARL Digital Contest under the call sign Oscar Yankee 6 Alpha. QSL via WB2 REM, OQRS, Club Log, QRZ, and LOTW. And for more information on both the trip and the islands, check out www.faroeislands.com, and that's Fox Alpha Romeo Oscar Echo India Sierra, FAROEIS.com. It's really a great website. Martin, NW0BRO, has departed for the Eastern Sovereign Base area, where he will be on holiday in QRV as Zulu Charlie 4 Golf Whiskey until June 9th. His sporadic operations will be mostly during his morning time frame. Activity will be on CW with some sideband but no digital modes. Listen for him on 40 through 6 meters. He is awaiting word on operating 60 meters and maybe on 80 meters with the expected weak signals that go with this. And you can QSL this via M0URX. Chris, Delta Charlie 6 Golf Fox, is QRV from the Seychelles operating as S79 stroke DC6 GF until June 6th. He's using a 5-band rig which puts out about 3 to 4 watts into an end-fed half-wave antenna. Activity will be on FT4 and FT8 on 20, 15, 12, 17, and 10 meters. And I'll reiterate what I said earlier, to think that he could be working in the Seychelles running 3 to 4 watts, and a lot of us felt like we could work him as crazy, but we're going to be able to. The most recent DX Mentor YouTube episode is available this weekend. Steve, KF8KI, was the guest. Steve discussed his amateur radio journey as well as his time with QRZ.com, where he is a developer. Check it out. You'll learn about some things about QRZ.com you didn't know and maybe some futures. If you're interested in DX podcast and YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all the DX activities that they're promoting. I know that the ARRL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mention are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in the log that may be otherwise difficult to get. The ARRL Digital Contest is just one of those events. It will be held the weekend of June 7th. The contest objective is for amateurs worldwide to contact and exchange QSO information with other amateurs using any digital mode except for RTTY that supports the 4-digit grid square exchange. Attended operation only on the 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, 10, and 6 meter bands. Any station may work any other station. Stations may be only worked once per band regardless of mode. Automated operation is not permitted. Each claim contact must include contemporaneous direct initiation by the operator on both sides of the contest. The contest period is 1800 Zulu Saturday, June 7th until 2359 Zulu on Sunday, June 8th. Let me know if you participate in that contest and how you do. Please send me an email if you need any details on that contest or anything else that we talked about today. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Right off the bat, let me start with a question. What do you think you're doing? To give you some context, it should come as no surprise that I'm talking about amateur radio, and what it is that we do, you and I, when we do amateur radio. Of course, the answer is different for every person you ask, and it's likely to change over time. So let's explore, and fair warning, if you know me at all, you'll realize that I'll be asking more questions. So here goes. Is this an activity that you do for yourself or for others? Is it a hobby or a vocation or something else? Do you use this as part of your life outside this community, and if you do, how? At this point, I hope you're getting a sense of déjà vu all over again, in that I'm asking you to explore your own place in the community. I'm asking because it occurs to me that we spend an awful lot of time looking in the other direction. How do we compare skills and knowledge against other amateurs? How does our shack compare with another? How does our antenna stack up? Which modes have you used? What things have you activated? How much power do you use? All things that might form part of the activity of amateur radio, but fail to look at you as a person and your role in this. For example, have you considered if you're interested in helping new amateurs, or would you rather just do your own thing? What about how you gain skills? Would you rather read a book, watch a YouTube video, attend a class, or play with others? If you're considering upgrading your license to gain more responsibilities, are you doing that for yourself, or are you doing it because of peer pressure? If you've been part of the hobby for a little while, you'll have discovered that radio amateurs are everywhere, often in unexpected places. With that comes the realization that this implies that we have members who represent all of humanity in its many splendid complexity. Where in that spectrum are you? And what is your role in participating in that wider community? And is your role what you want it to be? One of the themes I've discovered over the years is insecurity. A recurring perception is that amateurs who've attained the highest license level are somehow more amateur than those who are on another journey. Where do you fit in that? How do you perceive amateurs with differing license classes? Do you apply the same metric to moped, car and truck licenses? How do you compare yourself against those who are not amateurs, and how did you step into your license? I'm going to stop with the questions now and leave you with a thought. The hobby of amateur radio is a playground where you have the freedom to explore radio and all that it offers. but nobody said that you need to limit yourself to radio. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Hurricane season begins on Sunday, June 1st. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration predicts this season to be above normal in activity, citing above-average Atlantic Ocean temperatures. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the Hurricane Watch Net details.
The scientists say the season will likely produce between 13 and 19 named storms, including 3 to 5 major hurricanes. Amateur radio provides a robust tool and volunteer core infrastructure for emergency preparedness. There are several ham radio nets that the National Hurricane Center relies on to inform forecasts through surface observations made by volunteer operators. ARRL encourages all amateurs to participate in the Hurricane Watch Net, the VOIP Weather Net, and others that provide support and information to the National Hurricane Center via WX4 NHC, the amateur radio station at the National Hurricane Center. ARR Director of Emergency Management Josh Jansson, KE5MHV, says that each ham's individual observations can make all the difference in a critical situation. We know of stories from hurricanes in the past where a report from a ham radio station changed the forecast for landfall and impact by the NHC. We are also aware of information being shared of people being trapped and were able to get assistance to those victims after the storm. Amateur radio operators provide an important tool before, during, and after a storm. The Hurricane WatchNet, by the way, is hosting a special operating event to mark its 60th anniversary on June 7th and 8th. ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX, says that recent storms underscore the value of amateur radio when all else fails. During Hurricane Helene, it was the volunteer hams who jumped into action to relay health and welfare information. As mountainsides washed away, the repeaters on top were still working. Licensed amateur radio operators took to the air using their own equipment to provide a link of important information that no other means could. During Hurricane Ian, a ham saved lives on Sanibel Island by providing emergency crews the information they needed to rescue a family from the rising floodwaters. ARRL's Amateur Emergency Service, ARES, provides a program framework for local volunteer groups to integrate with served agencies in their local communities and to use the value of amateur radio service in times of crisis. And you can read more at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Last week, ARES was represented by Johnston at the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster Conference in Louisville, Kentucky. Johnston met with leaders of dozens of organizations to raise awareness and build relationships. Blue skies are the time to build bridges and make plans. Many groups have used ham radio for years, but it's always encouraging to share information with people who may not understand the capabilities and value ham radio provides, he said. Johnston was also a speaker last month at the Amateur Radio Workshop at the National Hurricane Conference.
Dayton HamVention 2025 returned last weekend to the Greene County Fair and Expo Center, where tens of thousands of amateur radio enthusiasts gathered. This year's theme was Radio Independence, celebrating the freedom and resilience that have always defined amateur radio. The HamVention itself dates back to the early 1950s. From the earliest spark transmissions to today's global digital modes, ham radio has pushed boundaries in innovation, service, and community. If you don't know anything about amateur radio, there's more to amateur radio than what most people realize, said Michael Coulter, HamVention spokesman. We respect our frequencies that were allotted. We want to keep those frequencies. We want to continue to use them, as do other amateur radio operators throughout the world. And there's a whole lot of new activities that are going on with amateur radio. Some traveled from around the world to attend the HamVention this year. Over 16 different countries were represented there with more than 600 volunteers helping to make the event run smoothly. They call it a labor of love in enjoying the show, learning something new and making new friends. If you were among those at HamVention Xenia, Ohio, you'll help set a record. Organizers report that a record 36,814 amateur radio enthusiasts came to the fairgrounds for the annual forums, exhibits, and of course the flea market. The event was put together with the help of more than 700 volunteers. Plans are now in the works for HamVention 2026 to be held on May 15th, 16th, and 17th.
AMSAT is soliciting nominations for the 2025 AMSAT Board of Directors election, scheduled to take place in the third quarter of this year. The seats of the following 4 incumbent directors expire in 2025 and will be filled by this year's election. Barry Baines, Whiskey Delta 4, Alpha Sierra Whiskey. Jerry Buxton, November 0, Juliet Yankee. Drew Glassbrenner, Kilo Oscar 4, Mike Alpha. And Zach Metzinger, November 0, Zulu Golf Oscar. Further, up to 2 alternate directors may be elected for 1-year terms. A valid nomination for director must be written and requires either 1 member society or 5 current individual members in good standing to nominate an AMSAT member. Written nominations with nominee's name, call sign, and contact information, as well as nominators' names, call signs, and contact information, should be sent to AMSAT Secretary Douglas Tabor, November 6, Uniform Alpha, 1133 Verlin Way, that's Victor Echo Romeo Lima Alpha November Way, Cheyenne, Wyoming, 82009. AMSAT bylaws require that the nomination be written and in the form specified by the Secretary, who has elected to accept written nomination materials via postal mail or in electronic form, including email or electronic image of a paper document. Fax transmissions cannot be accepted. Email nominations may be sent to dtabor@amsat.org. Regardless of the means used, petitions must be received by the Secretary no later than June 15th. The Secretary will verify the qualifications of candidates and nominate members of member societies as petitions are accepted and will notify candidates whether their nominations are in order by the end of June.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
ARRL members in Utah have elected Brett Pruitt, K7BDP of Hurricane, to continue as the ARRL Utah Section Manager, and his new term of office starts on July 1st. Pruitt received 275 votes, and Bob Craven, N7GTE, received 234 votes. Election ballots were counted on Tuesday, May 20th at ARRL headquarters. Pruitt was first appointed as section manager of the ARRL Utah section on February 1st after previous section manager Pat Milan, N7PAT, resigned from the role in late January for health reasons. Nevada will have a new section manager as of July 1st, 2025. Craig McVeigh, N0CSM of Pahrump, was the only nominee to run for the new term of office when nominations closed on March 6th. John Bigley, N7UR, the current Nevada section manager, decided not to run for a new term of office after serving as section manager for the past 10 years. The following incumbent section managers were unopposed after the spring season nomination deadline, and they have been declared re-elected. They will begin new 2-year terms of office on July 1st, 2025. Chris Van Winkle, AB3WG in the Maryland and D.C. section, Nomar Vizcarrondo, NP4H in northern New Jersey, Nancy Austin, KC1NEK in Rhode Island, Stephen Hendricks, KK6JTB in the San Joaquin Valley section, and David Overton, W5JDO in West Texas. The New Hampshire section manager position will be resolicited in October QST for an 18-month term of office starting on January 1st, 2026.
The 2025 ARRL Field Day is 5 short weeks away on June 28th and 29th. The theme of Radio Connects highlights how radio ties our world together, bridging distances near and far, connecting people of all ages and walks of life through a shared interest in wireless technology, and providing a hands-on pathway for future technology leaders to experiment with radio as part of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics curricula. ARRL has made it easy for radio clubs to make in-person connections during the event. In addition to the resources available for promoting activations that are available on the Field Day website at www.arrl.org/Field Day, there is a site locator tool. Clubs can list their activations, and those looking to attend a Field Day site can find one in their area. ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, Whiskey 5 Delta X-Ray, says the locator tool is important for bringing people together. ARRL Field Day is a great opportunity to gather. Not only will members of the public be able to visit with radio amateurs about our hobby, but many not-so-active hams use the event as a chance to get on the air, said Harrop. The site locator is key for making those connections. With a little more than a month to go until the big weekend, there were 538 sites listed on the locator. To search for a site near you, just go to the map and zoom in on your area. Click on the red map pins for details about each site. To add information to the locator, click on Add a Station. ARRL Field Day is the most popular on-the-air event held annually in North America. More than 31,000 hams participate each year. Connect with others who are preparing for the event in the official ARRL Field Day Annual Event Facebook group.
Since it was founded in Florida in January 1972, Marlin P. Jones and Associates gained a loyal following among amateur radio operators looking for everything from power supplies to electronic switches and other components. The family-owned business closed its doors on the 9th of May and announced on its website that it would no longer be taking phone calls after the 23rd of the month. Its remaining inventory was purchased by another company in Florida, Skycraft Surplus. Positive reviews of the company's customer service and the quality of its products reflect the satisfaction that hams and other purchasers of electronic components received after doing business repeatedly with the company, which was also known as MPJ and Associates. The company's website gave no reasons for its closure. A statement simply says, "It has been an honor to have done business with you."
The next few solar cycles could be even more intense. This due to the result of a little-known phenomenon called the Centennial Gleisberg cycle. Radio amateurs are familiar with the 11-year solar cycle, but for many, the Centennial cycle is a relatively unknown phenomenon. The Gleisberg cycle is a slower modulation, which suppresses sunspot numbers every 80 to 100 years. For the past 15 years, the sun has been near a low point in this cycle. But this is about to change. New research published in the journal Space Weather suggests that the Gleisberg cycle is waking up again. If this is true, solar cycles for the next 50 years could become increasingly intense.
The Fort Myers Amateur Radio Club has received the Parks on the Air Wiggins Acalfa Award, honoring dedication to amateur radio and a passion for public land. The award is named after a native plant to highlight the program's nature connection and is presented to operators who have either activated or hunted 700 unique POTA reference areas. The Parks on the Air is a global amateur radio initiative that encourages licensed radio operators to set up portable stations in state and national parks, historic sites, and other public lands. Since its launch in 2017, following the success of ARL's National Parks on the Air event, POTA has grown into a vibrant community of over 325,000 participants worldwide. The program promotes outdoor recreation, emergency communications preparedness, and environmental stewardship while fostering connections between radio operators across the globe. The Fort Myers Amateur Radio Club, established in 1957, supports the exchange of knowledge, fosters camaraderie among hobbyists, and emphasizes public service during emergency. An ARL-affiliated club, FMARC, promotes the art and science of amateur radio through various activities, training, and initiatives.
No one can physically see this devoted community, but its presence has been felt strongly throughout the Cleveland and north-central Ohio region for a half-century. The Burning River traffic net is still passing important traffic as it has done since its founding in 1975 as a 2-meter simplex net to deliver messages to recipients who lived outside the local telephone exchange, constituting a long-distance call at the time. Those messages include health and welfare updates, congratulations, emergencies, and simple greetings. The net has since become repeater-based and meets every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday at 9:30 p.m. local time. Members are called up on an as-needed basis on other days. The Burning River traffic net is about to become visible and meet the community as served for so long. The net, which is part of the ARRL's National Traffic System, is inviting all hams and anyone interested in learning more about the net to be part of their anniversary celebration. It's being held on the 21st of June at the Lorain County Metro Parks Duck Pond Picnic Area Pavilion at 1 p.m. local time. Net manager Keith Cook, Kilo Delta 8 Golf X-Ray Lima, said, "This is more than just a celebration of the past. It's an opportunity to look forward to the next 50 years.
An amateur radio exam session in Bangladesh sees an unprecedented turnout, with more than 900 participants taking part in the examination organized by the Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Commission. This historic event took place in Dhaka and witnessed amateur radio enthusiasts from diverse regions across Bangladesh coming together with a shared passion for radio communication. The Amateur Radio Society of Bangladesh said on its website that its remarkable figure represents the highest number of participants ever recorded for an amateur radio exam in Bangladesh's history. Weeks of preparation had gone into preparing candidates for the exam by offering online seminars as well as in-person training and workshops. There was also a field day, as well as classes in basic electronics and antenna building. The Antenna Radio Society said there was a great support from the Bangladesh Vespa community, a community service group of motorized scooter enthusiasts, many of whom also took the exam, which was organized by the Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Commission. The Amateur Radio Society Bangladesh, or ASRB, has played an instrumental role in promoting amateur radio activities, contributing significantly to a surge in interest. ARSB has been instrumental in fostering the amateur radio community by hosting a variety of events since 2018. ARSB is a government-registered organization in Bangladesh.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Pieces of an antenna, once atop New York City's Empire State Building, have found a new home, and the auction held for them has done a lot of good. You might say that this was one high-profile antenna that got great reception. The remaining 16 elements of the Empire State Building's 32-element Alford antenna attracted lively and profitable bidding at a charity benefit auction in April. According to a report on the Radio World website, a total of $7,500 was raised for the Society of Broadcast Engineers, the Ennis Scholarship Fund. The antenna, which was installed on the Manhattan skyscraper in 1965, was decommissioned in 2019. At one time, it served as many as 16 FM broadcast stations simultaneously. The individual elements weigh about 100 pounds, or 45 kilograms each. But thanks to this successful auction, they'll carry even more weight in helping support the careers of future broadcast engineers.
Welcome to the 28th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Hams, organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website in the production of these segments. Now sit back and relax and enjoy the next chapter of ham radio history. Radio telephone. As vacuum tubes were making CW practical, they were also making voice transmissions possible. Experimental broadcasts using radio telephone, or just phone to hams, began as experiments by amateurs and some of the wireless telegraph companies, including Marconi and DeForest. In these early years of radio, just having a receiver to listen to the limited number of phone broadcasts was sufficient to be regarded as a radio amateur. The Marconi wireless telephone was demonstrated publicly for the first time on 12 June 1916. Aboard a ship making its way out of Long Island Sound en route to Boston, an audience heard conversation and music via a 2-hour broadcast from Marconi's station in Aldine, New Jersey. David Sarnoff, then Marconi's communications manager, demonstrated the new technology to members of the New York Technology Club who were on their way to attend dedication ceremonies for new buildings at MIT. Among the distinguished group were Orville Wright and Alexander Graham Bell. That same year, thousands of amateurs listened to the DeForest Company's radio-telephone test broadcast of opera music from a phonograph in their lab at Highbridge in New York City. The company planned to continue the tests with a news format scheduled for every weekday at 8 p.m. on 800 meters. With so many hams in the audience, their request for reception reports was answered quickly as the mail poured in just before the war closing took effect. After the war, some of the first regular broadcasts came from Frank Conrad's station, 8XK in Pittsburgh, playing music. Westinghouse, his employer, began manufacturing simple receivers so that people who were not amateurs could also listen, establishing a new and different category of radio users. Several thousand Westinghouse receivers were sold in the Pittsburgh area in 1920, perhaps the first such sale specifically aimed at the general public rather than hams. Anticipating a business opportunity broader than just Pittsburgh, the company proceeded to erect broadcasting transmitters in several other cities. Conrad's station, 8XK, later became KDKA. This was the beginning of the radio broadcasting boom, which would put wireless technology into almost every home and revolutionize both commercial and amateur radio. One of the first in-depth technical treatises to cover radio telephone for radio amateurs was delivered by engineer Walter S. Lemon at an RCA meeting in the spring of 1920 and published in QST. Describing basic amplitude modulation, AM, Lemon emphasized the necessity of using only undamped waves, since any form of damped oscillation would not be capable of faithfully reproducing the modulating audio. With spark, for example, any audio that occurred between sparks would be lost. This fact had not kept people from trying. One early method of modulation simply involved inserting a microphone in the antenna or ground lead. However, the limited current-carrying capability and resultant heating of the microphone makes this scheme very wasteful of energy, and it has long since been abandoned, wrote Lemon, without mentioning the likely uncomfortable effects on the operator. With vacuum tube sets, you instead could modulate the grid or plate current by various means, basically the same ways practiced today. The plate or Heising system was preferred, in which a modulator tube's plate circuit was placed in parallel with the oscillator's tube plate circuit, both supplied with DC via a choke bypassed for RF by a capacitor. When the modulator tube conducted, it decreased the current in the oscillator tube, thus modulating the signal. Raymond A. Heising, for whom the method was named, was an engineer at the research laboratories of AT&T and Western Electric. He presented the idea himself to an amateur radio audience in another RCA to QST relay, a seminar at Columbia University in February 1921, followed by a 2-part QST article. It was yet another example of a radio pioneer, well published in professional journals, adapting his work to be understood and used by amateurs and describing it in a seminal paper. Heising explained the theory of amplitude modulation, but called it simply radiotelephony. His comprehensive treatment first warned against applying modulation techniques used in telegraphy, pointing out the fundamental distinctions that are obvious today. For example, in telegraphy, any old noise applied to the transmitted signal would suffice to make it audible in the receiver, whereas in telephony, the object was to have the receiver exactly replicate only the applied noise. He actually called it noise, meant in a generic way to mean useful sound, not a thing to be avoided. He proceeded to explain the basic mathematics, the origin of sidebands, which he called side frequencies, and the problem of overmodulation, describing its sound as tinny. Part 2 presented all the information amateurs needed to build an up-to-date radio telephone transmitter, including circuit designs and advice on which circuits and component values to choose for various kinds of vacuum tubes. In the summer of 1921, it was all there, the complete basic blueprint for sending sounds over radio. Many others would build upon this foundation for decades to come. Heising's article was just in time for, or perhaps one of the causes of, the coming explosion in radio telephony. Included in this material are quotes from the following. The Marconi Wireless Telephone, QST, August 1916, page 234. A Concert by Wireless, QST, January 1917, page 26. DeForest Wireless Telephone, QST, 1917, page 72. Clinton B. DeSoto, 200 Meters and Down, The American Radio Relay League, Incorporated, 1936, page 70. W. S. Lemon, Recent Development of Radio Telephones, QST, June 1920, page 7. R. A. Heising, Modulation in Radio Telephony, Part 1 and Part 2, QST, July 1921, page 7, and August 1921, page 9. With our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for his permission for us to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, in the preparation of this segment, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. This week we are saddened by the passing of Dick Jansson, KD1K, formerly WD4FAB, on May 13th. He performed thermal and mechanical design, computer thermal analyses, and material selection functions on many of AMSAT's spacecraft. Some of those were Oscar 10 and 13, microsats, and later AO40. He will be missed, and we thank him for so many dedicated years of contributions to AMSAT. Hades ICM-FM repeater will be activated Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays beginning in mid-June. The uplink is 145.875 MHz, and the downlink is 436.666 MHz, both FM. Hades R, or SO-124, continues 24-hour operation with its uplink on 145.925 MHz and downlink of 436.888 MHz, both FM. Remember that this satellite has Wednesday reserved for digital modes only. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for a look at the upcoming solar weather and this week's propagation forecast. Solar activity reached moderate levels early this past week with several flares. An X1 class flare erupted midweek, but activity has slowed down with the majority of the low-level C-class flares. A coronal mass ejection was observed on May 27, with a flare from region AR 4100. Modeling determined the CME to be well behind Earth's orbit. No other potentially Earth-directed CMEs were detected in available coronagraph imagery. M-class flare activity, minor to moderate, is likely, with a slight chance for X-class flare events, strong or greater, through May 30th. So looking ahead, the forecast of solar and geomagnetic activity to June 21, 2025 will look like this. Solar activity is likely to reach moderate levels, minor to moderate, with a chance for strong levels, over the next 3 days as region AR 4098, the most productive region on the visible disk, makes its way to the west limb of the Sun. A chance for M-class X-ray activity will persist throughout the outlook period due to multiple regions on the visible disk, as well as multiple active regions scheduled to return from the far side of the Sun. No proton events are expected at geosynchronous orbit. The geomagnetic field activity is expected to be at a mostly elevated level due to anticipated influence from multiple, recurrent coronal holes. Minor geomagnetic storms are likely on June 13th and 14th. Active conditions are likely over June 2nd, June 5th, June 10th and 11th, and June 15th through the 17th. Unsettled conditions are likely over June 3rd and 4th, June 6th and 7th, and again on June 18th through the 21st. Quiet conditions are only expected on June 8th and 9th. Looking ahead, the 10.7 centimeter flux will be 125 on May 31st, 120 on June 1st, 115 on June 2nd, 110 on June 3rd and 4th, and 115 on June 5th. Looking at the radio blackout forecast, minor to moderate, radio blackouts are likely, with a slight chance for isolated strong or greater events over the end of May. Enhanced solar wind conditions are expected through May, as solar wind high-speed streams activity persists. There will likely be a transition into larger transequatorial coronal holes on May 29th. Solar wind speed exceeding 600 to 700 km per second are possible based on recurrent trends. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, May 30th through June 1st, the Patexas 070 Club three-way weekend contest. That's digital. May 31st, the Feldhell Sprint. That's digital as well. On June 2nd, the RSGB 80-meter Club Championship. Data, digital. June 3rd, the ARS Spartan Sprint, CW. June 4th, the Phone Weekly Test. That is phone. Also on June 4th, the A1 Club AWT, CW. And on June 6th, the HA3NS Sprint Memorial Contest, that is CW as well. June 7th through the 8th, the Atlantic Canada QSO Party, CW and phone. The Kentucky QSO Party, CW phone and digital. The RSGB National Field Day, CW. And also June 7th through the 8th, the ARRL International Digital Contest, that is digital. June 10th, the DARC CW Training Contest, that's CW. And on June 11th, the RSGB 80-meter Club Championship, that is CW. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information in your area. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on May 30th through June 1st. It's CPAC hosting the ARRL Northwestern Division Convention. That's in Seaside, Oregon. On June 8th, the Breeze Shooters Hamfest hosting the ARRL Western Pennsylvania Section Convention. That's in Butler, Pennsylvania. And on June 21st, the Knoxville Hamfest hosting the ARRL Tennessee State Convention in Knoxville, Tennessee.
The Radio Amateurs of Canada continues to receive reports from RAC members of phishing attempts by individuals purporting to be from Radio Amateurs of Canada who are forwarding a message on their behalf. The latest reports use subjects and messages involving moving to a new secure email platform, final minutes, and announcements, among others. Previous reports also included gift cards for donation to veterans at hospice and palliative care units, and most of the messages have the names of RAC officials, many of whom are from recent and the distant past. Phishing attacks come from scammers disguised as trustworthy sources and can facilitate access to all kinds of sensitive material. Phishing attempts use publicly available information to fake legitimacy, and in some cases they use the names and contact information of RAC officials to gain your trust. They then provide instructions, such as asking recipients to save and open an attachment, and then sign in using their own email address. Please do not follow these instructions. One way to recognize that this is a phishing attempt is to look at the email address that's being sent from, and you'll see it's not an RAC email address. Remember, Radio Amateurs of Canada will never ask you to provide a login or a password in email communication. To date, there's been no direct successful attacks on the RAC computer system. Unfortunately, attempts to defraud people through email messages and phone calls are part of the world we live in today. We'll continue to take measures to ensure our computer system is as safe as possible and that our members are provided with information. Radio Amateurs of Canada is continuing to increase their cybersecurity. They don't keep any financial information, and only widely available personal information such as name, call sign, and dates relating to current membership is available in their system, so their risks are considerably less than compared to a commercial system. Radio Amateurs of Canada only collects personally identifiable information about you when you voluntarily provide it, and when you provide for membership and subscription services, or provide your personal contact info for publication or product orders. Every effort will be made to ensure the information provided will be securely maintained. For more information, see their privacy policy and cybersecurity webpage. They continue to stay abreast of any changes in cyber threats and their response. They're also planning to make available to members the use of security systems you may already be aware of in other systems, such as providing for the use of complex passwords, as well as two-factor authentication to log in. Radio Amateurs of Canada will never ask people to download files from a third-party site in their email communications. Always check to see if the sender of a suspicious email has a rac.ca email address, as all RAC officials use rac.ca. If you're concerned or suspicious, always contact the RAC office before opening any files in an email message that appears to be from Radio Amateurs of Canada.
It's time for AMSAT satellite shorts from all over. And we begin this week with the announcement that Peter Goodall, 2M0SQL, has developed PortablePlanner.com, a web application that allows portable satellite operators to calculate their transmit and receive frequencies and find mutual passes. The web application can be added to your home screen on iOS and Android devices and can be used offline. This application can help portable satellite operators easily determine what frequency to transmit and receive at on a linear transponder satellite when operating without computer control. Next, we wish congratulations to Benny Reitmuller, DL4BEN, age 16, on receiving AMSAT Rover Award number 087. To earn the AMSAT Rover Award, participants must accumulate a combined total of 25 points through various achievements in portable satellite operations outside their home grid square. The AMSAT Rover Award was established to recognize and honor the accomplishments of satellite operators who engage in rover operations. Rover operations involve the activation of grid squares outside one's home grid, utilizing various satellite transponders and modes to establish communication links. A breakdown of the point system along with a list of past AMSAT Rover Award recipients can be found online at amsat.org. Keep on roving, Benny, and continue to inspire others in the AMSAT community. And our final satellite short comes to us from Germany, where we find Germany's armed forces planning to establish a large satellite constellation aiming to create an independent communications infrastructure similar to SpaceX's Starlink. The initiative, led by Budweiser, envisions deploying hundreds of satellites to ensure secure and resilient military communications with potential expansion into remote sensing and other applications. Germany has historically relied on satellite services provided by allies, but shifting geopolitical dynamics have prompted a reevaluation of this dependence. The proposed Budweiser constellation is intended to ensure sovereignty and continuity in defense operations, even in contested or degraded environments. It would operate separately from IRIS-2, the European Union's own sovereign satellite project, aimed at providing broadband internet across the continent.
You're listening to America's premier amateur radio news magazine of the air, This Week in Amateur Radio.
The AMSAT Youth Initiative is pleased to introduce the first in its series of Satellites in Space Help Us Live a Better Life on Earth online courses. An Introduction to Satellite Meteorology explores the many ways that NOAA satellites help meteorologists predict the immediate weather and long-term climate behavior to make our lives more enjoyable and safer. It is designed for students grades 8 through 12. Each chapter has 40 to 50 pages and is expected to take perhaps 30 minutes per chapter. If you leave the course, it will remember where you left off, so you won't have to start from scratch. The coursework is designed to let students progress through the material independently. The first installment is called An Introduction to Satellite Meteorology and will be followed by the next release in June. Future topics include wildlife and natural resources, navigation, climate change, and pollution control. The course is designed to be self-standing, so any student, parent, youth leader, or teacher can independently utilize the course. The courses are free. You can try this course at buzzsat.com. Please note that the edition of the course is a beta release. Numerous improvements to the navigation features, clarity of graphics, and technical content are scheduled for the next release in 2025. But we'd love to hear from you. Please send your comments and suggestions to Frank Karnakis, AMSAT Vice President of Development at fkarnakis@amsat.org. Future courses to be added later this year include how satellites play a critical role in managing.
It is with sadness that AMSAT notes the passing of Richard M. Dick Jansson, KD1K, formerly WD4FAB, a longtime Vice President of Engineering for the Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation, on May 13, 2025. He was 94. During his working career, Dick held a variety of engineering positions with Sperry Corporation, including helping to develop, construct, and evaluate instrumentation for advanced supersonic and hypersonic aircraft, including the X-15 at NACA, the forerunner of NASA. Dick also worked at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Instrumentation Laboratory, where he designed, developed, and tested space navigation and guidance instruments for the Apollo program. Later, as a senior staff engineer for Honeywell, he created thermal designs for electrical-optical instrumentation on several critical U.S. space projects, including Explorers 33 and 35, as well as the Apollo and Skylab programs for NASA. Dick then went on to transfer his expertise to the Martin Marietta Corporation, where he was active in the design and testing of miniature closed-cycle cryogenic coolers for infrared detectors on several forward-looking infrared or FLIR applications. After his retirement from Martin Marietta, Dick performed thermal and mechanical design, computer thermal analyses, and material selection functions on a wide variety of AMSAT spacecraft, including Oscars 10 and 13, as well as the Microsat series. He was heavily involved in the thermal, structural, and mechanical design of the AMSAT Phase 3D satellite, which later became AMSAT Oscar 40 on orbit. And for his work on a number of AMSAT spacecraft over the years, Dick was honored by the Dayton HamVention with their prestigious Technical Excellence Award in 1993. Dick was first licensed as an amateur radio operator in 1972 and held an extra-class license. For many years, he resided in Maitland, Florida, with his wife, the former Mary Sweeney of Washington, D.C., who predeceased him. The Janssons were the proud parents of 3 children, Catherine, Carol, and Edward. A memorial service for Dick is set to be held at St. Luke's Church in Oviedo, Florida, at 10 a.m. on June 4, 2025.
A French amateur has been recognized for logging 61,000 contacts while on a de-expedition by himself. We say congratulations to Marek Lamachou, FH4VVK/F4VVJ, who logged more than 61,000 QSOs as the solo operator during a de-expedition on the island of Grande Glorieuse, operating as FT4GL. The island is the largest in the French-controlled Gloriosa Islands archipelago in the Indian Ocean and is 7th in the DXCC Most Wanted list. Marek was honored by HamVention by the Southwest Ohio DX Association as DXpeditioner of the Year. The association said that he had gone above and beyond the norm to positively affect the DX community. The DXpedition took place in May and June of 2024.
The Digital Mobile Radio Project, launched recently by the Radio Society of Great Britain, It's a way to provide opportunity and radio equipment for young new amateurs to become accustomed to making QSOs on a regular basis. The outreach team's new DMR kit contains DMR handheld transceivers and hotspots to borrow for as long as 3 months at no cost. Accompanying the equipment, of course, is the opportunity to use it, and the RSGB's team will also be hosting regularly scheduled youth nets to give as many participants as possible a good start. Licensed hams or school groups with at least one licensee are eligible to apply for the use of the kits. Meanwhile, the Society is also encouraging teachers to establish school clubs and become amateurs themselves. Funding for the Radio Communications Foundations will cover the cost of up to 9 teachers' exams. Additional details are available at rsgb.org.uk.
Every year, hams in the United States and Canada observe the 4th full weekend in June as Field Day, considered the most important amateur radio weekend of the year. In Hawaii, however, amateur radio recognition will be going on a little longer. The state's governor, Josh Green, has proclaimed all of June to be Amateur Radio Month in recognition of the 3,400 hams operating in the Pacific region. The state has ties to wireless that go back more than 100 years. However, in 1914, the island of Oahu became home to a Marconi wireless telegraphy station. In 1916, the first transmissions were successfully sent to Japan from United States territory, marking the start of wireless communication between the two nations.
In just a few weeks, one of the most popular summer operating events kicks off, the 13 Colonies Special Event. Now in its 17th year, the event has grown from special event stations making approximately 12,000 contacts in 2009 to last year making 300,000 contacts around the world. The event runs from July 1 at 9 o'clock in the morning through July 7 at midnight Eastern Time. That's July 1 from 1300 UTC through July 8 at 0400 UTC. This year, event organizers are recognizing the 13 Colonies Special Event founder, Ken Vallone, KU2US, who's passing the torch on to Tony Jones and 4ATJ. The special event consists of one station operating in each of the 13 colonies. Call signs will be K2A through K2M, and 3 bonus stations, WM3PEN in Philadelphia, GB13COL in England, and TM13COL in France, each representing their city, state, or country's role in America's colonial period. Malone said I needed a theme that all could relate to, and also the event would have to be the type with multiple event stations involved, like the ARRL sweeps. Then it hit me. 13 colonies states during the 4th of July week, and offer a certificate with a theme for the year. I made sure the theme was different each year with a different certificate design to make it interesting and to also make the cert collectible. The theme would highlight some event or thing connected to the American Revolution. The event was held July 1 through the 4th of 2009. I had a hard time getting 13 different operators, one from each colony state, but it worked. Ham radio operators and shortwave listeners can participate in the event. Complete information about the call for each colony station and the bonus stations can be found on the event website 13colonies.us, or they can follow us on Facebook at 13 Colonies. Stations need only make one contact with one of the participating stations, or they can go for the clean sweep and work all 13 colony stations and the 3 bonus stations. Each station offers a special QSL card for the event, as well as different certificates for each year. Operators can keep an eye out for these special event stations by watching many of the DX spotting networks, such as dxsummit.fi.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
On May 19th, the Scouts of Troop 37 in Arlington Heights, Illinois, discovered a trio of antennas and radio stations waiting for them at their outdoor meeting location. A short presentation explained how amateur radio is used in the community, licensing steps, how radio waves work, ham radio lingo and call signs, equipment basics, and safety. The Scouts divided into 3 groups and moved between the stations, making QSOs on UHF, VHF, and HF radios. Operators in Northern Illinois and nationwide were alerted to listen for calls from the Scouts, and it worked. The Scouts were kept busy on the air. Every Scout had contacts on each band for many operators in Northern Illinois and across 15 states, from Nevada to Maine. One Scout enjoyed speaking with John D. Williamson, Whiskey 5, Sierra Lima Oscar, in Texas while looking him up online and admiring his Jeep. Scouts were also amazed to speak to mobile operators, causing one to ask, "Are you driving the speed limit?" The reply, "Sure am." Another Scout, along with his father standing nearby, both let out a big smile when they were heard by Marion Mason, Whiskey 1, Gulf Romeo Lima, and discovered she is in the small town of Bar Harbor, Maine, population 5,000, where they will be vacationing this summer. Amateur radio helped them make a new friend. Troop leaders agreed it was great to see the Scouts' parents on the microphones as well. Event photos and details may be found on Kirk's Kilo 9 Mike Sierra Golf QRZ page or by visiting facebook.com/Troop 37 PTAC.
In South Africa, 48 new ham radio operators are celebrating passage of the radio amateur examination that they took in May, administered by the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. The RAE, as it is known, has only given exams twice a year. According to various news reports, while 48 candidates passed the exam, 5 others did not. The next exam is not scheduled until November.
True to its name, the Queen of the Mountains event is a challenge worthy of royalty. Paula K9IR and Amy AG7GP have brought the event back for its second year as YLs activate soda summits on June 7th and June 8th. And not only YLs around the world chase the activators, men are also invited to join in this year's chase. Anyone contacting 5 or more YLs on a soda summit become eligible for a certificate. The biggest honors will go to the YL activators themselves, who will be logging contacts and working toward any or all of 6 achievement awards, including one for a first-time soda activator. A special Kane 1 LIZ Memorial Achievement Award will be given to the YL with the highest number of achievement awards. Last year, the event crowned Lorene W6LOR with the honor, which bears the call sign of top-achieving activator Liz Burns' K1LIZ, who became a silent key in February of 2022.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77 @gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
And finally this week, you can think of them as the dynamic duo of the universe. No, they're not Cape Crusaders, but a red dwarf star and a white dwarf, which is also a dead star. Together, they have been sending a steady radio pulse every 2 hours for at least the last 10 years. Scientists have heard their transmission, but until recently no one knew the source of the sounds, which appeared to emanate from the direction of the Big Dipper. Recently, the signals were found to come from a binary system. That's two stars that send the pulse by repeated contact between their magnetic fields. Researchers cracked the mystery with the help of low-frequency antenna array radio telescopes. The discovery debunks the long-held belief that only highly magnetized neutron stars, known as magnetars, could emit such a pulse. The challenge to the old way of thinking opens up the chance to explore other mysteries and binary systems.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to w2xbs77@gmail.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you would like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and all our news team around the world, this is Will Rogers, K5WLR in Fayetteville, Arkansas, wishing you 73.